everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Amina, and I'd absolutely love it if you could subscribe to my channel to see more from me, in particular content to do with productivity, lifestyle, how to design your life in a way where you are more productive, more efficient, and just living a bit more intentionally. Then we'll be talking about something that affects pretty much all of us, which is a memory loss, or just forgetting things after we've learnt them in such a short space of time, and how to kind of tackle that. And I'm going to be referring to the forgetting curve. Now, the forgetting curve was first coined and first discovered by a psychologist called Ebbingus, and he described a curve, a memory curve, whereby the ability to retain information decreases as time goes on. So once you've learnt something, as time progresses, you are more likely to forget it. And this can be very annoying because, you learn something, you read something, and when you come to apply it a week or two later, it's gone. There are ways to decrease that sort of plummet that occurs over time through the way that you study and through the way that you actually try to learn and memorize. One thing to bear in mind is that this memory curve describes a loss of memory or the loss of information when no effort is placed to actually retain it. What it's describing is when you've learnt something once and you don't come back to it, this is what happens. In fact, a week after learning something, most people retain about less than 20% of that information that you've learnt. What I've done is I've found 5 different techniques that you can do and you can implement in your learning in order to prevent that rapid decline of the memory curve over. So the first technique is spaced learning. Now, spaced learning is the process of learning information again and again and again, but leaving a bit of time in between when you learn it. What that does is actually reshapes that forgetting curve, and it stops the information from just being forgotten like this, but actually it does decrease, but as you learn it, it increases again, and then it does decrease and it increases again, but that decrease slowly stops declining the more that you go over it. So in the end, it helps with retention, and it does take that information into your long-term memory, which means after a number of spaced learning sessions, you don't have to go over it as often, but your memory will still be as sharp. The science behind it is this periodic learning ensures that you are applying that information and retrieving that information. And this retrieval process is really important in order to really solidify that memory. So the first time you learn it, you've just understood the concept and you've understood how it works. The second time you learn it, you are applying what you've understood onto a question maybe, and again you're reinforcing that learning. The next time you look at it, you might want to do a more challenging question, or you might want to look at something where it's applied, or it's asking for a bit of a theory, or it's asking for a bit of a proof question if it's maths, for example. So again, you're building on your knowledge, but all based on that initial bit of learning. And so spaced learning is definitely one of my favorites, and it's one that I've recommended on this channel a lot before as well. And it's really up to you what time gaps you leave. It depends on sort of when your exam is coming up or when you need that information for, but I definitely recommend leaving a couple of days, no longer than a week, to when you go back to it. And again, this is why a timetable or some sort of organization is really important for you to be able to know, right, I've learned this today, when do I next want to go back over it, and schedule that time and make sure that you do go back over it before then, in order to kind of retain that memory without going back and doing all the hard work all over again. The second one is mobile learning or dynamic learning. Mobile learning is when you learn on the go. So you might be learning whilst you're traveling, you might be walking around in your room with a book in your hand, but not sitting still, not static. Even if you are at a desk, you could be standing, for example, and just sort of moving your legs, but just not sitting still. And in fact, some research was done recently in a lab in Montreal. What they did was they gave a bit of information to 2 different groups. One group was sitting down, the other group was on a treadmill with a desk in front of them. So they were moving and mobile whilst doing the work. Then 10 minutes later, they gave them some questions on the reading task that they had to do. And like I said, both groups were given the exact same thing to do. And they were monitored with an ECG. So they had an ECG that monitored the brain patterns of the parts of the brain that control memory and retention. And what they found in their research, which I think is super, super interesting, is that almost 40% of the questions were better answered or correctly answered in the group that were moving and dynamic than the group that were just sitting still. And also what they found in the brain activity in the ECG ECG is that there was more activity and kind of more noise in the areas of the brain that are to do with memory and recall, which I think is super, super interesting. And obviously there's a lot more work to do to understand why that is. But if you are someone who struggles with sitting down and memorizing something, then you might want to think about just picking up a book and walking around your room, doing circles, going to a park, even going to the gym on a treadmill and just learning something. It does really help with memory and not forgetting that information. The third way of trying to change that memory graph is by gamification. Studying in a game-like way, applying sort of wins and losses and that sort of gaming technique to a study or some sort of learning task. And the reason why this is so useful is because what it does is it mixes things up for you as a learner. So you're not just reading a sort of a page of text without any breaks in between, but you're actually doing bits and chunks of information with images, with videos, with text, and you're changing things up and you're getting instant feedback. It's just like a game where you win or you lose quite quickly. Again, you find out if you're right or you're wrong quite quickly, and it really helps with retaining memory and kind of getting that recall, again, just that recall of information out from your memory. So one way that I recommend you do this is by using flashcards. Now, you are welcome to make your own, but I know that there's places like Quizlet, for example, I'm sure there's others as well, where you can just go online and find flashcards that are pre-made and you can just tap through. It activates the same brain regions that playing a game does. So you've got that instant gratification, and then you kind of can go backwards and fix the mistakes that you made, or restart that question or restart that topic. And again, that really helps you with memory recall as you're having short, snappy bits of information. It's not so text heavy. The fourth method that has been shown to help with retention of memory is by creating a culture of learning in your learning environment. This refers to sort of peer learning and teaching others. I recommend you finding a buddy, finding someone that you can teach. Feel free to get paid for it, because that's even better. But find someone that you can teach and teach them the concept that you want to learn. By teaching someone else a concept that you want to learn, you are reinforcing that information. You're also challenging any mistakes that they make. So when they make mistakes, you can tell them, no, actually that's incorrect. And again, that allows you to apply what you've just learnt. It allows you to solidify what you've just learnt. And it means that you are able to retain that information much better and bring it back up when you need it in an exam in a few weeks or a few months' time. It's when I've taught someone else that I find that I memorize much better. And the last thing that I can recommend to help you with the forgetting curve is by deciding what you need to learn and making it relevant. Remember that the brain is not just an endless capacity of space where you can just learn as much as you possibly can. And what the brain does is it picks and chooses what it thinks is important, and it remembers that and doesn't remember the rest of it. So naturally what this does is it accelerates the forgetting curve, because you end up maybe retaining only a small percentage of what you've learnt and forgetting everything else. So in order to combat this, only learn what is relevant. And this applies, I think, more so with university students in particular, where you kind of have the free reins to learn and read as much as you can, and then use and apply whatever you need to in an exam question or an essay. But think about what is relevant. Think about the key areas that you need to learn. What is the fundamental bits of information that you need to learn? Learn that first, and then go on to learn any extra parts that you might want to add to kind of pad out your essay and make it sound a lot more critical, or a lot more like you've done a lot more reading. What I recommend you in order to do this is condense the information that you have into just a few bullet points. Let's say you want to memorize information about the mitochondria. You do not need to write down that it is the energy powerhouse of the cell. All you can write down is energy, ATP, Christe, a few bullet points of its structure, maybe what it does. What you'll naturally do by doing that is you only need to memorize those key words. You don't need to then memorize the whole sentence. And you can form the sentence yourself when you're in the exam. You're really taking those keywords, you're memorizing them, it's the most relevant bits of information, your brain will not forget them, and you're just cutting out the background noise and the extra information that is really just taking up space when you don't need it. I'd recommend you not to pick just one of these methods, but actually to mix it up a little bit. You need to make sure that your information is relevant, but also use spaced learning. But also you might want to use some flashcards and gamify your revision a little bit. it. There isn't one way that fits all, but definitely think about the way that you are studying. And I'm sure you've heard this before, but work smarter, not harder. You want to make sure that you are not just reading textbooks all day and not really learning or memorizing very much, but instead learn in a way that you can make sure that you are not forgetting that information and you are able to spend a lot more time on recalling that and practicing past papers. If you did enjoy this video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye.